The Supreme Leader. For nearly 40 years, Ali Khamenei was the immovable pillar at the absolute top of Iranian society. But that era has come to a sudden, violent end. An operation that few believed was possible has changed the map of the Middle East overnight. While the world's capitals are still reeling from the news, the plan for what comes next was already 40 years in the making. A new leader has already stepped out from the shadows. He has been trained for this moment since he was born, yet he remains a mystery even to those within his own borders. And now he inherits a nation in its most dangerous hour. This is the story of Mojtaba Khamenei. If you want to understand the man who now controls Iran, you first need to understand the world that shaped him. Iran didn't always look like the country we see today. In fact, Mojtaba was 10 years old when the Islamic Republic was established and Iran's pro-Western king was overthrown. That revolution didn't just change politics, it transformed everyday life. The easiest way to understand that is to see it. This was then, 1979, and this is now. In the decades since the revolution, Iran has moved away from being a US ally. Instead, it has positioned itself as the main axis, fighting directly against Western alliances in the Middle East. It has backed groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. More recently, it's even supported Russia in its war against Ukraine. As the country changed, so did the lives of the Khamenei family. Before 1979, they were living close to poverty, in a cramped one-bedroom home outside of Tehran. Then the revolution happened. Within months, everything changed. Mojtaba's father, Ali Khamenei, became an important cleric in the new religious order. Over time, he would rise even further, eventually becoming the supreme leader of Iran that we all know today. For 10-year-old Mojtaba, that poverty became opulence. It became power overnight. Remember that, because that's a formative age for someone's entire world to suddenly change. From that moment on, Mojtaba Khamenei will grow up inside the very center of power in the new Islamic Republic. While the Khamenei family became richer, Iran itself became poorer. Iran's GDP per capita actually peaked in 1976, 3 years before the revolution. Economic woes and the removal of so many liberties sparked huge protests against the new religious order, and that's where the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps stepped in, also known as the IRGC. They act as a state within a state, dedicated to crushing dissent. They have their own army, their own navy, their own air force. Since 1979, tens of thousands have died in crackdowns across the country. At least 7,000 of those, and potentially as high as 50,000 of those deaths, have happened this year. The control of the Supreme Leader was finally starting to wobble, or so we thought. On the 28th of February, everything changed. The United States and Israel attacked Iran. Within the first hours of the attack, something almost unthinkable was confirmed. Ali Khamenei was dead. Around the world, people celebrated. Inside Iran, tens of thousands of people poured into the streets. For the first time in decades, there was real hope that the religious dictatorship might finally collapse, that the threat of nuclear missile programs would be over, that the liberties of so many who had had their freedoms taken away could have those rights restored, an opportunity for peace in the Middle East. War is rarely that simple. Instead of peace, more countries have been dragged into the war. The global oil supply is under its greatest threat in history. Cities, once considered safe bastions of Western power in the Middle East, are now literally exploding before our eyes. Despite everything thrown at it, the Islamic Republic is still standing. Although its supreme leader is dead, the Islamic Revolution is certainly not. It's been preparing for this, and so has Mojtaba. Remember where we left off. Mojtaba was just 10 years old when the Islamic Revolution happened. Many of his formative years took place right at the center of that new world. He went to Alavi High School, famous for its religious teachings and for its links to the IRGC. If the IRGC is the muscle, think of the school as its brain, the perfect landscape to train smart, ideologically aligned leaders who could prosper in its ranks. That is exactly what Mojtaba did. As soon as he graduated, he joined the ranks ranks of the Habib Battalion, a frontline unit during the Iran-Iraq War. Mojtaba is said to have participated in several major operations, and it's his period serving with this group that would enable his power to grow for years to come. Several of the men he fought alongside with would later become some of the most powerful figures inside the IRGC. That includes former intelligence chiefs and the commander of Tehran security. Interestingly, and unlike many of his former colleagues, Mojtaba has never held an official role within the IRGC or the government of Iran. He's always chosen to operate from the shadows. In a country where power is usually displayed openly, that makes him incredibly unusual. There are no major speeches, no official government title, no ministry, no command within the military, and yet inside Iran's political system, diplomats, intelligence officials, and clerics have quietly said the same thing for years. The man who controls access to the supreme leader often controls the country, and for decades, that gatekeeper has been Mojtaba Khamenei. Mojtaba rarely appeared in public, but every few years, his fingerprints would show up somewhere important. In 1989, his father Ali Khamenei was elevated to supreme leader. Around the same time, Mojtaba began his clerical studies, a key step for anyone who might one day seek the position themselves. As his father consolidated power throughout the 1990s, Mojtaba quietly began building his own network inside the system. As early as that decade, he'd been credited with finding ways to undermine and organize against more moderate movements. He even requested assessments on the political situation at various universities. It was one of the first signs that he'd been given a degree of authority to oversee domestic threats. By 2005, though, he had his eyes set on a greater prize: the presidency. Not directly, not himself. That's not Mojtaba's style. What is pulling the strings. He is widely attributed with the unexpected rise of hardline candidate Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who went from relatively obscure mayor to president of the country. Mojtaba reportedly changed his mind late in the race and even convinced his father that Ahmadinejad was the more ideologically pure candidate. His re-election 4 years later was even more controversial. Ahmadinejad was declared the winner just 2 hours after polls closed. Given that Iran uses paper ballots, many believed it would have been impossible to count them all that quickly. In some provinces, the number of votes recorded even exceeded the number of eligible voters. Perceived by many as a coup against more reformist candidates, the public erupted in protest. Allegedly led by Mojtaba, the Basij, a paramilitary wing of the IRGC, known for street suppression, quickly and aggressively brought the demonstrations to an end. The protests were crushed, and the regime survived. At least 30 protesters lost their lives in that crackdown. Such was the violence and Mojtaba's influence on it that some protesters were heard chanting, "Mojtaba, may you die so you never see the leadership." That is quite prophetic and equally quite telling. With his father gone, this man who once ruled from behind the curtain is finally stepping into the light. On March 3rd, Donald Trump expressed concern about who might replace Iran's leader. You go through all of this, and then in 5 years you realize you've put somebody in who was no better. Right now, that new leader is Mojtaba Khamenei. It's impossible to predict the future, but you can infer a lot from the past. His own people once chanted for his death, praying he would never see the leadership of the country, and yet here we are. In his first statement as Supreme Leader, Mojtaba was combative. He vowed revenge and threatened to open new fronts in the war. Millions celebrated the death of Ali Khamenei. Millions more are now terrified that the end of one page may simply mark the beginning of another chapter. Any threat of rebellion has already been met with a shoot-to-kill order from the authorities, a striking continuation of Mojtaba's long-standing belief in order whatever the cost, even against his own people. Many analysts believe his rule may strike an even harder tone than his father's. He is the first supreme leader to have grown up entirely inside the system created by the Islamic Revolution. In many ways, he was shaped for this moment from childhood, and perhaps prepared for it. Now, at the same time as this video goes live, reports suggest Mojtaba may be wounded, in hiding, or both. A $10 million bounty has been put out for any information on his whereabouts. For now though, he remains alive. And as long as he does, his grip on the country and the Revolutionary Guard appears firm. If the swift transfer of power has shown us anything, it is this. The roots of the Islamic Republic run deep, deeper than any one man. A war that was meant to be fast continues to drag on. A regime that was meant to fall and flounder has found its new leader in less than a week. One who's been moving toward this moment since the age of 10. There is an old Persian proverb that may describe this situation perhaps better than anything else ever could. He wanted to pluck the eyebrow, but blinded us instead. Thank you so much for watching my video. Please feel free to like and subscribe. I put out 2 videos a month. Have a lovely day. Goodbye.